And we think it's really important that we're able to have this dialogue with representatives from DCFS and be able to ask them questions. So this is a safe space. As Tiambe says, this is a safe space. We're not going to hurt you. But we do have questions and we do have things we need to know about DCFS. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Derrick.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Derrick Perez-Johnson. I'm the program manager for Parents in Partnership with LA County DCFS. I've been doing that for a few months now. Before that, I was directly operating PIP operations here in the southern part of LA County. So I've been with Parents in Partnership for 3 years. I will let you know that they are a part of a reform movement that started probably back in 04 or 03, somewhere around that, when we went into a partnership with the Annie E. Casey Foundation, we as the DCFS, in order to reform various aspects of DCFS, including instituting data-driven decision-making, instituting team decision-making meetings, and so on. Part of that reform movement was instituting parent voice and choice within the department. Their operation started in 2006 in 4 offices. We're now in 13 offices. We have about 43 parent advocates working on those sites with the goal of being in every DCFS office by this summer. So, without further ado, I will introduce you to part of my fabulous team of advocates and DCFS folks who work with us. First to my left, you have Supervising Social Worker Pat McQueen from the Lakewood office, who is a liaison and works very closely with my team and has been with Parents in Partnership longer than I have been.
7 years.
So I'm very knowledgeable about what the operation does and what we're about. Next, you have Julie Emery, who is one of our lead parent advocates, works in the Lakewood office. Very trusted, very skilled parent advocate who's been with us a number of years. How many years?
Almost 5.
Almost 5. She's longer than me as well. Next, you have Desiree Burlile, who I'd like to call our team decision-making expert of the team. One of our great on-the-spot advocates who's also been with our team a very long time.
2.5 years, almost 3 in August.
So we came in together. So without further ado, here's our team. 3 of our 43 of the team. These 3 are from the Lakewood office, and they're going to bring you an example of what parents did when they come to what we call a parent orientation. So without further ado, here's the team.
Sure. What parent partners are is parents that have successfully navigated through the child welfare system and have successfully reunified with our children. And so our case has to be closed for a certain amount of time, and we're sober a certain amount of time, and we work closely with parents going through DCFS because it's really confusing. And I had wished that I had a parent partner when I had my open case. Maybe I would have reunified with my first child earlier.
If you can't hear us, we're going to try and do it without the mic. So if you can't hear us, please raise your hand and that'll just alert us. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then,
I went back to the back. It was a little low.
okay, then we're going to take this off and just pass it around as we talk.
You need to hold it up close to your mouth.
Okay. We have this program that we do, I'm just going to tell you, where we interact a lot with one another. Can you hear us now? We interact a lot with one another, so you'll see us passing the mic a lot, but that's what we do when we do our presentations in the community, because we really work as a team. So you'll have to bear with us with the mic.
Start again?
Yeah. No, you don't have to start again.
Okay. Okay, as parent partners, we have 5 deliverables. The first one being lobby, which is one of the most crucial, because in the lobby we come in contact with parents that are, just freshly getting their children detained. It's somewhere where we could console the parents, give them hope, hopefully encourage them to advocate for their families. And also, a lot of times we'll pull out our cell phone and get them on the phone calling their relatives to hopefully get their child placed with the relative.
Okay, and a TDM is a team decision-making meeting, and it's called by the social worker when a child is at risk of being detained, removed, or replaced. A parent partner is able to sit in TDM and support the parent. We also have parent partners working in the back, being on the phone, calling to, like if their child is at risk of being detained and they needed to go into an inpatient program, working on the phone behind the scenes. And then they'll just knock on the door and say, hey, we got a spot for them at this location.
We also have a Wormline number where any parent could call anytime and leave a message, and we'll call them back within 24 hours. We also now have a desk line because we do go into the jails. So now the people that are incarcerated, the parents, could actually call us, and we also worked on getting resources for those parents, connecting them to programs so that hopefully they could get an early release and get started on their case plan goals.
Okay, South County holds 4 support groups. There's no DCFS staff, so the parents are able to feel safe and vent. There's 2 parent partners that run it. We have 2 located at an inpatient program for the parents that are residing there, and we have 2 at an outpatient location. And it's just a great way for parents to get connected to other parents going through the similar stuff. We actually have a parent that did not reunify with their child, and she still comes to our support groups off and on. And her story is very powerful, and it touches the parents that have the open cases. And it's just so inspiring for them, and they really want to do what they have to do in the time frame that they have to do it.
We also have our parent orientation once a month in the community, and we also do mobile orientation so that we could go and reach the women that are in inpatient programs. We also do our parent orientations to staff in programs. And through that orientation, we explain our story. We go through the timelines. We'll give you a shortened version of what we do. We also give them a parent handbook that is, a lot of things I didn't understand, especially one of the key things is the difference between termination of parent reunification services and termination of parental rights. A lot of parents give up when they hear termination of reunification services, which they could still reunify, and you'll hear Desiree's story. Also, I share because I have an ongoing story. I just reunified with my oldest child after 10 years, and so I could also explain how to file a 388 petition to end guardianship.
So that's an overview of the 5 key services that we provide. We provide a lot of one-on-one support for parents. And I'm just going to talk a bit about the community outreach that we do, and then, like Julie said, we go out in the community and we do orientations, and so we're going to give you an abbreviated orientation in part so you get a sense of what we communicate, and in part to educate you about what how our system works, since you are all out there talking to people who are involved. We go to local churches, we go to parenting programs, we go to domestic violence shelters, we go to drug treatment. That's probably our biggest one. We go inpatient, outpatient. We'll go anywhere where people will have us, because we're just trying to get the word out. And the number one thing that our program does, we educate, but we really give people hope. Because as you know, DCFS is a pretty scary organization for people. And they often don't believe that they can get their kids back. And we have, at our office, we have 5 PIP staff. They actually have their own room. They all have computers. We have a Spanish-speaking PIP, so we're starting a Spanish-speaking group, and we do Spanish-speaking orientations for the gentleman who wanted Spanish-speaking stuff. We also have a male, and that's really important because a lot of our fathers think, and maybe rightly so, that things are geared toward the mother. So it's really helpful to have a male get out there and work with these fathers. We also go into the jails. We go into Linwood Jail and we do our presentation, and we have a group of men who go into Wayside and do a presentation, and they actually have a support group in Wayside. It was really interesting. The first support group they had 19 participants. So that tells you what the need is. And you're going to hear when Desiree tells her story, which I'll get to in just a minute. I want to go to something else. Julie said, which is our handbook, and this is it. We have a sign-in sheet at the back. It's pretty long, so rather than bring everybody copies, if you are interested in a copy, if you sign up in back and give us your email address, we'll send it to you and you can print it. It's really good to have if you go to a court hearing. If any of you have ever been to a court hearing with DCFS, you walk in and all this stuff happens really fast and they speak legalese. No offense to the attorneys present in the room. But parents often walk out and go, what happened? Right? And so this book will tell them, what is a 21E? What is a 21F? Oh my God, I'm at a .22. What is that? Right? So you can look up all of these things and see what they are, which is really, really helpful. And obviously it's 30 pages, so it covers a lot. We also put these flyers in the back for you, the support groups that we talked about ours. This was just our office that we were talking about, but they are throughout the county, and we have Wormlines that are listed here throughout the county. So if you are working with somebody who resides in another part of the county, they can call the Wormline closest to them and get support groups and parent orientations that are close to them. One thing I always forget to say, so I'm going to say it right now so I don't forget, is we are also in court. We have a parent liaison in court. And Derrick, how many did he have? Over 100 contacts last month from court, right, that he sent out to the region for follow-up.
From Element, I think we had about 150, 160 contacts.
Yeah. And that's really a key time to get parents because they're so worried, right? It's like going to a criminal court. Our system is very much like a criminal proceedings. Things go in a system just like the criminal court does. So it's very helpful. And the last thing I want to say before I introduce Desiree, I'm checking my notes. No, there's one more thing, map panels. You want to talk about map panels?
We also participate in PS map panels where we go out and speak to prospective resource parents, which are foster parents, and we go ahead and give them the birth parent perspective. So, and also we were coming into contact with parents that, you know, their children went into adoption. And so we were trying to figure out how could we help these parents that have so many questions about how can I, you know, reach out to my child after adoption. And although, you know, less than 1% of adoptions fail, there is a paper that we found that they could leave their information in their child's case file if the child comes looking for them after the age of 18.
And that's one of the things we find with the different populations we go to, they have very different needs. When we first started going to the jail, they didn't know who their social workers were. Well, now we send an email to every social worker so now the social worker knows they were in there and they know they went to their program. Then they couldn't get visits, so we all went out and met with friends outside and set up so that we could easily refer them to get visits with their children. Then, like Julie was mentioning earlier, they couldn't get into drug treatment programs because you can only make collect calls from jail, right? So they call us and the parent partners will make the referrals to the drug treatment programs and then they can go into the jail and see these women. So we're really trying to coordinate services and partner with our community partners. I want to bring up a statistic, and normally Derrick does this, and it's a fabulous statistic, so I really want you to hear it. Derrick was working with an intern a couple of years ago, and this is a 2011 statistic based on our specific program. And what the statistic says is that if a parent attends one parent orientation, which is what we're going to give you the abbreviated version of, they are 22.6% more likely to reunify with their child. Okay, this presentation is an hour to an hour and a half long when we give it in the community, and that means that 1 out of 5 parents who attend it are going to reunify faster with their children. So it's really impactful. Part of the reason it's so impactful is because it always starts with the parent giving their story. And this is a very personal thing, and Desiree has volunteered to share her story today. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and we're going to do our presentation now like we would do it in the community, but a much shorter version.
Okay. Hi again, my name is Desiree. A little bit about myself is my parents were heroin addicts. They gave me up when I was 6 months old. I had 2 younger sisters and they went right into foster care. And we got to see each other while they were in foster care, but once they got adopted, there was no contact. When I was in 4th grade, I was molested by my best friend's father. And back then they didn't have the therapy that they have now. And so we just didn't talk about it. You know, when I was 13, I turned to drugs and alcohol, and I used on and off for about 31 years. I've been to prison 3 times. How I got my first DCFS case was my gram had died in October 2004. She was the one that raised me, and that's when I just like totally lost it. I had a 17-year-old that wasn't going to school, and then I had a 3-year-old, and I was leaving her with my aunt and cousin days on end. I was leaving her with my best friend, and then something had happened to her. A close friend of mine had touched her, and me not dealing with my own issues, I didn't know how to deal with that. And I continued to get high, and somebody called on me. And even knowing that social services was coming out to investigate, I can't even stay clean. And so they removed them out of my care. They actually stayed with my aunt and cousin, and I went into an inpatient program. I was 3 months pregnant when I went into the inpatient program. Within 6 months, I got my daughter back. My son stayed with my aunt and cousin. And I was actually in the program for 15 months, but I didn't really work on all those issues, and I didn't have a good support system. And so I had got Section 8, I had a clean baby, I had my daughter back, and but I didn't have a foundation. And I do what I do best, and I got high. I let the guy move in, the dad, and we relapsed together and got pregnant again. And this time I used through the whole pregnancy. And at the end of the pregnancy, I tried to get clean, did not work. And me and the baby both came up positive for meth. And I believe that's when my turning point was. Leaving the hospital with no baby, just feeling so ashamed, so guilty, so hopeless, so lost, and so empty. I guess that was my truly rock bottom, because I believe I hit my rock bottom a few times, but I guess that was it. So left the hospital with no baby, just felt so empty. I didn't have any reunification services, so that meant the department wasn't helping me. The social worker didn't have to come out and talk to me. I didn't get a bus pass. I went into a program, and I'm very grateful that the dad stepped up to the plate, and he also went into a program, and it was his first case, it was my second, so he had the reunification services. I was still calling the social worker though, saying, how can I get the reunification services? I'm in an inpatient program. I'm learning about my triggers. I'm really working on myself this time. So within 6 months, I got the reunification services. I got my older daughter back within 8 months, and the two little ones, they were both under age 3. So I'm very grateful they went with the dad. And our case closed with us with joint custody. I worked on myself in that program. I got really connected to a church, which I'm still connected to. I learned about, like I said, I learned about my triggers. I got a support system. I got a sponsor, my sponsor has a sponsor. And I only hang around with positive people. I don't go back to the old people that I used with. I had to move out of the area, and I got a whole new way of life now, and I'm a parent partner today. I'm a member of my church. I have a great support system, and I think that's a key. I think that's a big key, is having a support system. And I am very thankful that social services intervened, because I wouldn't have got clean and sober. I wouldn't be the mom I am today, and I wouldn't be the person I am today. So I could truly say that I am grateful that they intervened, because that totally impacted my life and changed it. So I am truly grateful. And thank you.
Okay, so welcome to the Parents in Partnership Parent Orientation. And we advertise, we've been where they are. How and why families come into the system. We explain that a call comes into the line, and it could be by a mandated reporter, and we give them examples, nurses, teachers, or it could be a concerned citizen. It could be an actual concerned citizen, or even somebody angry at you, a nosy neighbor, angry relative, an angry boyfriend. But either way, DCFS has to investigate the call. What is child abuse and neglect? Physical abuse is obviously leaving any kind of mark on your child. Sexual abuse is touching, fondling, molestation. Also, if you
Knew or reasonably should have known.
knew or should have reasonably known, and leave your child with somebody that was a molester, and maybe they molested you, and then you leave your child there to get watched by this person, and then they end up getting touched, you could actually count yourself as sexual abuse. Emotional abuse is abusing the sibling, belittling, and also domestic violence. You know, your child's witnessing you getting abused. That's a huge emotional abuse. General neglect is depriving your child of any of the basic necessities, food, clothing, shelter, but also I had general neglect because of my substance abuse. So substance abuse falls under the general neglect. Severe neglect is anything close to death. Also, if the child has a wound and it's not being treated and it starts to fester, or they're really malnourished and stuff like that, they could get severe neglect. Exploitation is having your child transfer your drugs for you, selling them for prostitution, and having them stay home from school to watch your children so that you could go and run the streets or whatever.
So we explained to the parents that they can get multiple counts. So they can get a general neglect count and they can get an emotional abuse count. Again, very much like the criminal system. And we say that because people understand the criminal system better than they do ours. So it's easier to see that chain. Next, we go into the way that families come into our system. So the first thing is that a call goes to the hotline and an emergency response worker goes out to the home. The emergency response worker can go out and find that everything's fine and close the referral, or they can go out and have some concerns and open it into a case. So these are the types of cases that they can have, and they get progressively worse. The first is family maintenance. That means that the child stays in the home. It can be either court or voluntary. Voluntary doesn't mean that people are really excited to have DCFS in their life. It typically means they're agreeing to it because if they don't agree, then we may take it to court and they may wind up having a court case. It doesn't mean that we necessarily will, but it is an option for us. And sometimes if people don't want a family maintenance case, they say, no, I really don't want it, and we're going to take it to court. I encourage them, go ahead. If you don't want it, have your day in court, because if the court doesn't think we have anything legitimate, they're just going to close your case and you're going to go on with your life. So it is a fair chance for people to have their side heard, rather than, we're not trying to bully them into participating with DCFS, although it does seem like that to them, I give you. Then we have family reunification, and that is again either voluntary or court, and that means that the children are out of the home. A lot of parents want to know, why would somebody voluntarily place their children out of the home? And there are some really common reasons why people do that. There are three that come to mind for me. One is if you get incarcerated and you don't have anybody to care for your children, then you can voluntarily place your children. It is a maximum of 5 months and 30 days, so you have to be out of your incarceration by that period of time, or it becomes a court case. Also, the department won't agree to a voluntary case if you're not going to be able to resolve the issues within 6 months. So if you've been using meth for 15 years, a voluntary case is not going to work, right? Because you're never going to recover and be all great in 5 months and 30 days. Other reasons people do voluntary cases, if you're homeless and you don't have any way to provide for your children. People put their children into foster care, get on their feet, and get their children back. And a lot of people go into programs, and if you have a lot of kids, and a lot of our parents do have a lot of children, you can't take 8 kids with you into a DV shelter, most likely. And you can't take a 14-year-old male into a DV shelter. So sometimes they'll take some of the kids and will voluntarily place others. So I just want you to know that there are options for us, and there are options for our families. If these things don't work and they go to court and they don't reunify, then we start looking at permanency planning options. Parents don't often believe it, but our first permanency plan is to return children to their parent. And that really is our goal. That is the goal of the whole PIP program. The reason DCFS is funding this program is because we want parents to get their children back. And we figure the best way to do that is to have somebody meaningful that they could talk to and to get them the information as quickly as possible so they do what they need to do and get their children back. If we don't return to parents, our next option is adoption. And parents are often kind of perplexed about, why would you go from returning to me to adoption? Well, I can tell you why. Less than 1% of adoptions fail. And if you're not going to get your children back, we want them to have a permanent home. So if we don't do adoption, and a lot of families won't go for adoption because grandparents don't want to be parents. They don't want to take that role away from the parent, because in an adoption, all relations are severed. So if your child is adopted, your sister is no longer an aunt to that child. Your grandparents, the grandparents are no longer grandparents. Siblings are no longer siblings legally unless the adoptive parent adopts the siblings. So it's really a serious matter, and you don't ever want to get to that point. But from the department's perspective, if you're not going to reunify, we want these kids to have a permanent home to grow up and have a regular life, and so that's why we move in that direction. The next one is legal guardianship. Legal guardianship is permanent until the age of 18, so they don't inherit anything. The problem with guardianship is about 10% of those fail. So that means 10% of those kids are going to wind up back in our system. And when does that happen typically? Let's see, they hit 14 or 15. What happens at 14 or 15? Yeah, I see nods, you know, right? They get very difficult. The guardian's done this for years. They're like, I'm done. I'm just done with this. They're back in the system. Not good for the kids, not good for the guardians, but you know who it's really good for? It's good for the parents. A lot of our parents get their kids back at that time, because if they've been clean and sober, or they've done whatever they need to do, actually DCFS policy says the first person that you're supposed to look at is the parent. So from our parent and partnership program, that's something we really want to say when we go out there, because again, we never want people to give up hope. You know, you just don't give up hope, it doesn't matter. Kin gap simply means it's with a relative, so the difference between kin gap and regular guardianship is kin gap doesn't have a social worker coming to their house every month until the child turns 18. If you're not a relative, you do have that. Long-term foster care really means the children stay in foster care. It means we haven't found a more permanent plan. And then we always mention AB 12 because it's a new law. If you're not, it's not that new now, but kids now between the ages of 18 and 21 can continue to stay in placement and get funding. And if they're pretty together, they can actually become their own payee. They can go to college. It really helps them, because we had so many youth that were becoming homeless or incarcerated. So it's set up to help them. And we want parents to know that. It's the kindler, gentler DCFS. Okay, this is my last page, then I'll be quiet. Quickly, we go over, not so quickly with parents because they're really interested in this, we go over how our system works. So your child is taken into custody. What happens in criminal proceedings? 3 days later, you go to court, right? What happens in dependency? 3 days later, you go to court. So 3 business days. So on the detention hearing, and by the way, this is all in our handout, our booklet. The judge decides whether we acted appropriately. Do you think most of the time the judge thinks we acted appropriately? Yeah. And actually, most of the time now we get warrants. We don't just take kids into custody. The only time we take them into custody is when it's an exigent circumstance. So for example, I had a worker who walked into a home and there was a 4-year-old child in the home, there was a pile of drugs on the coffee table and a loaded weapon on the coffee table. Okay? That's exigency, right? He can't leave and leave that child safe. So we took that child into custody, but most of the time it's not that way. Let's say it's a domestic violence episode. We go out to the home. You would think that'd be exigency, right? But most of the time, one of the people are arrested. So now you don't have exigency because the perpetrator's out of the home. But if mother's not willing to get a restraining order, we're probably going to ask the court for a warrant to remove the kids, or to remove from one parent. Parents can also agree to removal, and sometimes they'll do that because if they tested positive for methamphetamine, and we're not buying that they were just around somebody who smoked it, or any of the 100 million other excuses they give, they'll consent to it because they know we're just going to go to court and get the warrant. And then it's much more cumbersome because then we go out with the police, so now law enforcement's coming to your home, so now all your neighbors know your business. So after the detention hearing, things happen about every 3 weeks. In general, or on the average, all of these times can vary, but the jurisdictional hearing is where they determine what the language is. And we often modify the language. So a count might be that mother took a belt and hit her child 30 times, leaving welts and marks. Okay, if we sustain that language will always be a part of their permanent record. So parents don't want that language, right? So what they might agree to in mediation is they might agree to mother used inappropriate physical discipline. And the parents will agree to that, and DCFS might agree. And why would we agree? Because we just want to make sure that the parent gets whatever services they need so the child is safe when they go home. So it isn't as important that we have this specific language. What's important is that we have the specific issue addressed. The next hearing is the Dispositional hearing, and this is where the judge orders what they need to do. So domestic violence counseling, parenting, drug testing, whatever it is, that's where the court makes that order. After that, every hearing occurs every 6 months. So 21E comes before 21F. It's simply a 6-month hearing. And at this hearing, the courts are always looking at the same thing. Should we return to the parent? Should we liberalize visits? Is this case going nowhere and we should be moving toward a permanent plan? That's what's happening. If we get to the .22, that means that the parent has not reunified. We're now 18 months into a case. If the parent hasn't reunified, we must come up with a permanent plan. So if the child isn't going home, we're looking at adoption or legal guardianship by this time frame. Now, I don't think it's on here, but it is on here. One of the things we really impress upon parents, if you have a child under the age of 3, if you have 10 children and one of those children is under the age of 3, you only get 6 months to reunify. Now, you can get more time. If you go in at 6 months and you're doing what you need to be doing, they'll give you more time. But if you go in at 6 months and you entered a drug treatment program at 5 months and 3 weeks, they're probably not going to give you any more FR services, family reunification services. So it's really important for parents to know, because we can't let them languish for 4 months and then go in and you never get those 4 months back. The clock is already ticking. So that's really something we try and impress upon them. The .26 is where the permanency plan is established. So the .22 says either we're going to return home or we're going to establish a permanent plan. The .26 is where the permanent plan is established. So that's the difference between us.
So we go over some of the parental rights. We go over visitation unless courts limit the visitation rights. Usually the case plan will outline a visitation schedule, and I always encourage parents, if it doesn't, to go ahead and get that in your minute order. At a time, my mom wouldn't bring my children to come visit me, and so once it was in the court report, then it was a court ordered, and she had to come bring my children because it was a court order. Be aware whether the visits are monitored or unmonitored. Sometimes the relative caregiver or somebody might tell the parent, go ahead and take little Jimmy to the park, but we always encourage parents to follow the monitored or unmonitored rule, because if something happens to that child, they could lose their placement, and it could also limit their their time frame to get their child back or their visitation. The department's not going to no longer trust the parent will follow these rules of monitored, unmonitored. The visitation plans depend on the progress and quality of visits. When my child were in care, we started out with 1 hour a week. Now DCFS is really generous with 3 hours 3 times a week, and some parents are like, what, that's it? And I'm like, that's really good, because I only got an hour with my children. So full disclosure to make informed decisions. Parents know their children the best. They know their families the best, to advocate for themselves and to let them know issues. I always disclose my sexual abuse history, because that was something I had to address in order to get over, my substance abuse issues. So I always bring that up to parents with substance abuse issues, because there's always an underlying issues to that substance abuse. To attend all court hearings, I encourage parents to attend all court hearings. I used to show up to court hearings, they said I didn't have to be present, and it always seemed like there was things going on that making decisions, and I wouldn't have been there. Participating in developing the case plan, including decisions about educational, medical, religion, placement options, and mental health services. We always tell the parent, if your child's going to have a graduation, or even if your child's going to have a surgery, to bring it up to the social worker and also to the caretaker, because parents could actually be present to these things. Participate in any case conferences with your CSW, and also to meet regularly with the social worker, and to have the privacy protected, especially if it's in a domestic violence situation.
Okay, parents' responsibilities. Voice your concerns. Like at a TDM, we always tell them they're their best advocate to be sure and speak up, and always ask questions. Cooperate with the case plan goals. For instance, mine was I needed to go into an inpatient program, I needed to do substance abuse education, I needed to drug test, I needed to do parenting class and stuff like that. Comply with all the court orders, instructions. We just tell them to just follow whatever the court has ordered. And our program is completely volunteer, so like if they go to a orientation that we have, or if they go to our support groups, or they even could come into the office for like a one-on-one if they're seeking support. We have an activity log that we give them, and we sign it off for them, and we tell them to show it to their social worker, take it to court with them, and things like that. Because it's completely voluntary, so it's doing more than what the court orders. It's being very proactive. Inform the social worker about changes in my family, like if somebody moved in or out, be sure and let the social worker know. And if you're getting your child back, because if you're going to have somebody living at that house, they're going to have to live scan and things like that. Make the most out of our visit. We tell them to bring a game or a favorite snack or something. And if they're having issues with the monitor or caretaker, do that after the visit, you know, just make the most, that's your time with your child, to stay bonded with your child, you know. Work with the social worker to schedule meetings. We know it's very overwhelming to do all the classes. And like if you're doing a parenting class and you're supposed to meet your social worker, be sure and let your social worker know. I'm sure, you know, the social workers will, they'll accommodate because they know that you have to follow your case plan. And this is a huge one. Document my efforts. Keep notebooks, journals, keep a file. And our handbook, we also have a visitation log, and we tell them to be sure and write down, you know, the time they got there for the visit, and things that might have happened during the visit. Just document everything. That's huge.
And also with the visitation log, it's really important because, you know, sometimes the caretaker, you know, they want that child. It could be a relative or something, and they could say, oh, you know, the child came back dirty and he was crying. And maybe we have on our visitation log, I took little Jimmy to the park, he got dirty, we had fun, and he cried when I took him back because he didn't want to leave me. And it would match what the caretaker had to say about, you know, how the child came back, and it would explain why little Jimmy was dirty. So, what is the DCFS chain of command and how do I use it to resolve disputes? You know, we explain this, and we also give them a handout so that they could write their social worker's name, their supervisor, and up the chain. But we explain to them that once they call the social worker, they have to leave that message. You know, we'd have parents that would say, I call my social worker, you know, 20 times a day, and we're like, did you leave a message? Well, no, but she never answers the phone. Well, how does she know that you called if you're, you know, calling 20 times and never leaving a message? We try to encourage our parents to give them a little bit of time because they do have, you know, huge caseloads, and sometimes they're out in the field and whatnot. And then if the social worker for some reason couldn't resolve the dispute, or you can't get a hold of or it's pertinent, to go to the supervising social worker. And usually the supervising social worker will walk right around the cubicle and let the worker know, look, this parent's trying to call you. If for some reason the supervisor social worker couldn't help you resolve the dispute, there's always the assistant regional administrator, and then there's also the regional administrator. And so we encourage the parent to know these people and to have their phone numbers handy. And if they don't know these people, they could either call the front desk or they could call the PIP Wormline, and we'll try to find out who their CSW is. And by our CSW roster, we could find out who these people in the chain of command are for them. And then so our whole goal of the program is to empower parents and to teach them how to address any concerns and to be proactive and appropriate in manner. We encourage them to dress properly when going to court. You know, I see parents at court sometimes in their pajamas, or, you know, are looking like they just rolled out of bed, and we encourage them to be high, nodding out inside the lobby. We try to encourage them. Our bringing random people, you know, I remember one time I had to get a ride, and I brought somebody, and I was really embarrassed by the person that I brought. We encourage them to surround themselves with, you know, a good support network, and not to bring anybody that could be damaging to their image. So that's about it. Our Wormline number is usually on the back, or on the last page, but it's on our pamphlet in the back.
Any questions?
Any questions, anybody? Okay, I'm gonna go around.
The policy with adoption, with siblings that are adopted, is it that siblings are estranged? The siblings are estranged if siblings are adopted? Is that the
Could be if they're not
policy
adopted.
now?
If they're not adopted together, they could end up in different homes, adopted by different people.
Adoptive homes, they would be estranged?
They could be. We also have the option, I know sometimes families will enter into a post-adoption visitation agreement. So if you had two parents who decided they were adopting a sibling set, they could agree, these two parents, to have visitation with those kids after the adoption, even though they would legally no longer be siblings.
And that's the point I was making, is that legally they're not siblings anymore. If they're not adopted by the same parent, they're legally not siblings.
So it's up to the adoptive parents
That's
to
right.
work that out on
That's
their
right.
own. If they don't, then that relationship is not maintained.
And we can recommend, I know I've done this before when I was a regional worker, when I was a regional soup and all that, well, you can recommend that a family consider going into a mediated process with, like, I know Consortium for Children is one that I remember right offhand. You can recommend to the court that a family be recommended or be referred to that process to develop a post-adoption agreement between two adopting parent sets. But those parents can decline that. They can say, well, no, I'm not interested. I want this to be our kid and our family and sever all ties and move forward, and that would legally be their right. They could do that.
Yeah, and we try and get sibling groups adopted together. But if you have 11 children, you know, we're not going to get 11 children most likely adopted together. You know, 4 or 5 maybe, but once you get above that, it's very, very difficult.
And then, woman in the jean jacket had a question, and I'll come back to you, ma'am, in the front. You had a question?
Acknowledgement. I didn't have a question. So
Okay, I'll take that.
I just want to acknowledge you guys up there. I'm so proud of you. I'm a parent partner. I used to be in kinship care for 15 years, raising my sister's kids. I always wanted a program where you could educate the parents instead of the relatives and the foster parents. I am so overwhelmed this morning. Thank you so much. You're doing a great job.
I wanted to add that my sisters had got adopted. We found each other a few years ago off of the internet. You know, you can register and stuff like that, but we found each other and are you willing to share that? Pictures? Oh, okay. I actually have 7 children altogether. 3 I gave up for adoption because I wasn't ready to stop doing what I was doing. And it was an open adoption, and so I get pictures, letters, and things like that. And I'm very open and honest with my 3 that I have, my 2 young ones and my older daughter. And they know that they have 3 sisters, and you know, they ask questions, but they always, you know, talk about them too.
Thank you again for your wonderful work.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I have 2 questions. One is during the .22 stage, when they're at the 18 months, they have 18 months period, what type of social emotional support are the children receiving in terms of therapy or school support, social emotional supports in the schools for the transitional period?
Frankly, that's a kind of difficult question to ask because every child is different and every situation is different. Most of the time, by the time we get to the .22, the kids have been in that placement for a long period of time. Because if the parents aren't unifying, one of the first questions the social worker asks when you go to do the initial placement, one of your first questions is, if reunification fails, are you willing to make a permanent plan for this child? So we're looking at that from day one. We didn't talk about it in this presentation, but we do in the community. We talk to the parents about concurrent planning, and we're always running 2 plans. The department is always running 2 plans. One is to reunify, and one is if the reunification fails, so that we're not at .1. But kids are certainly entitled to services, and they're entitled to post-adoptive services. They're entitled to services with guardianship, so they can have therapy services endlessly.
And also, I encourage parents, if they know that their child has something not addressed, like a mental health issue, because when a child is in placement, they seem to get services faster. You know, when us as parents have our children, we're in huge waiting lists in order to get our child seen, and sometimes our children are denied the therapy. So, I mean, when they're in placement, it's good to get it all addressed at one time, so we encourage our parents to seek the therapy right away too.
You had a 2-parter.
Yeah, I kind of combined that.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I will only add to that by saying, there's a statute you might want to look at, Adoption and Safe Families Act, 1999, which pretty much changed the game. That made it so you had to talk about it made the social worker look kind of schizophrenic, because you have to talk about adoption out and permanent plan in the event that the parent can't get their crisis solved, while at the same time talking with the parent about how to solve the crisis. So to the family, you look like you're helping her or him, the parent, but at the same time, you're planning for them to not do well. And that's by statute since 1999. So that might be helpful.
I want to add one thing too, to the 18 months, this is really important. If you're incarcerated, you get an extra 6 months. So you get up to 24 months if you're incarcerated.
Awesome. Okay, and then I'm going to keep going this way, and then let's go like this. So, Matt.
I just want to interject something. I am with Women's Shelter of Long Beach, and I'm privileged to have attended many, many, many TDMs. And if you ever have the opportunity to go to one, it's an amazing experience. And you become part of that team decision making, and it's so powerful. And if you've got a client, you know what they're going through, and it helps you understand what they're going through. And so, thanks for the TDMs.
Thank you. I'm going to keep going this way.
I've encountered a community liaison in the Edelman Court. Is he part of the partnership program?
It depends. There's several folks several operations that are working out of Edelman Court right now. You have DPSS, who's up there trying to get people signed up for the Affordable Care Act. You have Children's Institutes up there. You have grandparents as parents. CASA, which is the court-appointed advocates. And yes, we have an advocate there as well. His name is Ryan Bennett. He's been there about a month. So yeah, there are a number of folks. I think the goal with Edelman, and that's a good person to ask about that, is Judge Nash. He's really accessible. I think they're trying to turn Edelman into a kind of a one-stop shop. So I don't know if that works or not, because we've seen that parents are really traumatized when they go to court and they're trying to get out of there. So the jury's out on whether or not court becomes an effective one-stop shop, I think. But we could be talking about the same person.
When you were addressing that 10% of legal guardianship, is that correct? Aren't successful, and there's an option for the child if they're over 14 to reunite with the parent at that point, because as you acknowledged, it's a very difficult age, particularly if there was a rough relationship with the parent because of substance abuse or whatnot. Are there services also for that reunification process?
Yes, they get reunification services just as if they had just lost the child. So yeah, they would get full services. And actually, any child can go back to the parent if a guardianship fails. It just is more typical when they hit the teenage years, because that's more typically when they fail. But guardians pass away sometimes, and other things happen.
Say that.
So.
Okay.
It seems like there's been a lot of improvement and many changes through the years. I still have a concern about women who've been in domestic violence relationships for years and years and years and years. And I would tell my clients, the abuse didn't start 5 years ago, the abuse started 35 years ago, because usually these women have been in homes where there's been abuse. And so for them to get this all together, and let's say they have a child 3 or under, for them to get everything together in 6 months, I think is just a huge, huge thing for her. And I understand, that we have to pay attention to the children and their needs, but I think it's unrealistic for these women to be turned from being severely battered and not even just physically, but emotionally, to turn into this organized, assertive, woman who's going to pull it together in 6 months and get her kids back.
But as you recall, I said that they had 6 months, and if they weren't doing services, the court would terminate. If they're trying, the court will give them another 6 months. And then now that you're looking at 12 months, and they could potentially get up to 18, and then when they go home, there's another 6 months of services. So I understand your concern. I'm just saying that it isn't so black and white, and if they're trying, they'll get more time.
I was just going to add that a large percentage of the parents that we see at DCFS have domestic violence in their history, one point or another. So we share your concern as an operation with regard to how do we best serve, or how do we best reach out to that survivor of domestic violence in a way that makes sense, in a way that's timely, so that they're aware of some of the parameters so that they can be proactive. One of the things that we've done recently is we've taken more account of how we can prepare our parent advocate staff with regard to working with survivors of domestic violence, as well as how do we care for them in that process so that they don't sort of risk re-traumatizing themselves and sort of the risk that that might play on their own families. So what we did was we went out and we found training for them. And then we sent a number of them to outside training agencies with the hope that, one, to build up our own capacity internally, and two, to build up our capacity to do more support group work inside shelters in the inpatient part of the work. What we found was that those women who are in the inpatient part of their process in terms of domestic violence survival, it was hard for them to get services from DCFS while they were sort of inpatient. So what we found was that we had to bring it to them. And then we had to talk about, well, what would that mean for us? So that part I'll hand to Julie and Desiree, because they're actually a part of that process.
So last night, me and Desiree started our Project Peacemakers training, and it was a really wonderful training. It was just the first night, but we got a lot of information. We were amazed of the different agencies that were present there, and we're really excited about getting trained on being domestic violence support certified.
You also went to that extensive parenting.
Oh, also as parent partners, me and Desi actually got asked to do hand-in-hand parenting, and that was a training. I don't remember how many weeks we went, but we went for a good amount of time, and it was a really good. It taught us a lot of tools, not just to bring to our parents, but for our own households. So I'll let Desi talk about it.
Yeah, I learned one that I'm still applying now, which is special time. I have my daughter's 13 now, my other daughter is 8, and my son is 6. And my son is taking it with the most, he's like, as soon as I get home, what about special time? And that's just where, like we set a timer for like 5 minutes, he picks out the activity and we actually play together. And the other ones are I have them busy, so it's just his and my turn, my time.
And with 4 children, in my instance, it's really important to get some individual time. I make it like more of a day thing, like where I take my children individually on day things. So we really put it into practice just in our own home life, and being a parent partner is bettering us as people as well as trying to help other parents.
Erica?
I have 2 comments and a question. Like this lady here, I was a CSW several years ago, and so hearing all this is just so awesome, because part of the reason I left was feeling so frustrated with feeling like I wasn't really helping people. Second, I was thinking, how great would a program like this be in terms of the parent support and people who've been there for the families that are just shy of DCFS involvement, like the people who are really struggling but they don't meet those abuse counts and so they can't get services. And my question is, it seems like you guys have really thought of everything, like doing the MAP classes and being in the courts and being in the treatment programs. Was this based on something, or did you guys kind of come up with all these ideas as you went? Because it's pretty incredible.
Now they're looking at me and laughing. We started pretty much, I talked about this as a reform movement, and it probably started around the time where you were planning on leaving. I joked because she and I were CSWs together. If you remember, we talked about a number of things that needed to happen at that time. We started with Family to Family, and we entered into a partnership with Annie E. Casey. And so not only were we talking about things, we had money to try things, because we had UPS money, what can Brown do for you type money. So, we were able to fund their operation to get it started on grant money without any kind of DCFS funding, which really freed them up to think outside the box with regard to what needed to happen. So what happened was you had a lot of parent voice in determining what needed to happen for parents. So a lot of the stuff that they're talking about is a result of DCFS people in partnership with leads like them and Pat and so on, like us partnering with them and talking about what can we do with the grant. Now that we're on county funding, what can we do? How can we secure funding for various things? The parent advocates always bring us brand new ideas about what if this or what if that. And usually they look at me and they laugh because it's my job to try to figure out how to get the money for it, which I gladly do, and I'm proud to work with them because they always come up with great ideas. I think I laugh at Julie because one time Julie came up with a great idea. She thought I was upset.
I thought I was in trouble.
But she had solved something that my boss's boss couldn't solve for like 2 years. And I said to her, I was like, "Do you know what you just did?" And she's like, "Oh." And I told her, you figured out something that a division chief or a deputy, whatever, could not figure out for like 2 years. And you figured it out. So now I just got to find the money. And we went out and we made sure we got the funding for it. But the innovation that you're talking about is from them. The funding is us fighting for the funding, but the ideas are from them. So.
Do you have any idea what percentage of parents take up the services available?
Good question. When we did the research design, when we tested the research design that Pat talked about a couple of years ago, that was just a test to make sure that it worked, so that we could then sell it to the department as something that we should institutionalize across the board, which I'm still trying to get done. So as of today, I can't tell you exactly how many DCFS parents we've touched, but I can tell you that they've had close to 100,000 interactions with parents that we know of, that I can document, close to 100,000. Now they do a whole bunch of other things that I've not been able to document yet, which is oftentimes they're helping parents when they're getting ready to go into a TDM and they're scared, they don't know why they're there. They're there. Parent comes out of a TDM and now they're more scared because they're not sure what they need to do now with this laundry list we've given them, and they're there. And some of those things I'm not able to document as well as I'd like to right now because we're still trying to figure out how do we get our thing done by this large department, but we're working.
And if I can address it, I can tell you this office, and we're only one of 12 or 13 offices, right? We have over 1,000 contacts a month in this office with parents. And part of the challenge, you asked, how does this grow? It really is an evolution. We get in someplace and we go, well, this is great, but now we need this. So then we go get whatever this is. One of the things Derrick has been working on is trying to get our BIS system to allow us to have access so that it all feeds into our computer system and we could really easily pull that kind of data out. And that's actually a project that Derrick's been working on. So that's an evolution that we're trying to make come forward.
Any other questions? Okay. A couple more because we're at 9:30 and then
As case managers, parent advocates, and therapists, how do we link our clients to you guys? Are they automatically linked after the TDM? Are they kind of like paired up automatically, or is that a choice? Is that an option?
I'll speak to it in general, then I'll hand it off. We're completely voluntary. We're not in the compliance mode, and we've done that as a development, as a design from the parents' voice in our operation and sort of made operational, which is their belief is that if they're in a position that they're reporting back to CSWs about what parents are doing and not doing, that takes them out of their parent advocacy role, and I tend to agree with that. So our program is completely voluntary. We do take referrals from CSWs or from the community or from whomever. Our requirement is that you talk with the parent about who we are and what we do and get their consent. Once you have that, then we'll contact and we'll work.
Okay, so we can contact you and maybe link them.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, sometimes personalities clash, so we have 5 parent partners, like we said. Sometimes bilingual people prefer to speak Spanish with a Spanish parent partner. We have that too. And sometimes we joke with the security guards. They're like, "Oh, you guys are 5 deep," because we'll come out all together, and the parent could kind of get a feel and then pull aside who they would prefer to talk to. And
sometimes dads want to talk to a dad, and we have a father.
Yeah, we have a father. Sometimes with certain issues, some of our parent partners have experienced domestic abuse themselves. Some are deep in their, substance. And, we kind of pick and choose our parents, and we kind of get a good feel for them. My favorite part is working in the background. So I usually kind of, go in that TDM. Is it substance abuse? How old is the child? And I'll get on the phone and be trying to find that parent a bed before the TDM is over so that the child won't be detained.
So DCFS is not making that determination. That's the parent leadership is figuring out.
And anybody can call them Wormline. We have Wormlines throughout the county, and they're on the flyer, and anybody can call them.
But we can strongly encourage
Yes.
our parents if they're struggling with
You
navigating.
can hand our number to them. If they're the type of parent where you think some of our parents move around quite a bit, and you're thinking maybe we should reach out to them, if you get their consent, we'll do that too.
Okay, consent.
Ma'am, and then, wait, I saw you. I know Paul's gonna pull me at me anymore.
I just wanted to ask about relationships and partnerships with schools, knowing that sometimes kids that might be exhibiting with behavioral challenges or educational challenges, what kind of supports are involved in helping families who might need to really be challenged with dealing with that IEP process, that special education process, that linchpin that might be needed between home and school partnership?
Well, we know that a lot of the districts now have a foster care liaison or something like that. So we talk with our parents about that. Some of the work that they do is around talking with parents around the IEP process itself and how to advocate for yourself in it. So they talk about the importance of documenting your efforts, the importance of getting your letter in on time and what the letter needs to say and all that sort of stuff. So they do talk with parents about that one-on-one. They didn't talk about it really a lot right now, but they do offer parents one-on-one work. So if a parent just wanted to come in and talk with someone about this type of an issue, they would say, okay, on our team, who's good at IEP work? Who's done that before? All right, we'll get that parent set up with a one-on-one with, says Julie. I'm picking Julie out because I know Julie's worked with this. And then, you know, they'll have an opportunity to come in and talk with Julie about, you know, what you might want to pursue from a parent perspective, sort of to advocate for yourself and your family. They won't do it for the parent. I'll just be clear about that. They're trying to help the parent do it for themselves.
We empower.
We need
That's
to
the
wrap
way.
up the program, and then if there's other questions, can you stay for
I can
just
stay
a
for a
short
bit.
time? Okay. All right, so I want to really thank you guys for coming.